If you've been trying to house hack your way to your first home, or maybe you're just trying to find new and creative ways to make house buying a lot more affordable, after all, we're in an incredibly expensive market right now, it just actually got a lot cheaper for you to finance your way to buying your first 2, 3, or even 4-unit property. Now, you see, it used to be that if you wanted to buy a multi-unit property and use a conventional loan, you'd either have to put 15% down or as much as 25% down if you were trying to finance up to a 4-unit home. But starting on November 18 of 2023, you actually are only going to need 5% down to buy your first multifamily home. Okay, but why is that such a big deal? I mean, after all, I thought that you could buy a multifamily home and live in one of the units using an FHA loan, and that only requires 3.5% down, right? Now, while that is true, and FHA loans are definitely a favorite amongst house hackers, there's one big downside that the FHA has that makes it almost impossible to use the FHA loan at all, where the conventional loan doesn't have this downside at all. But really, the big question is, how can you start taking advantage of these new rules today so you can stop throwing away money on rent, start house hacking your way to your first, second, or even third property, but also end up saving a ton of money in the process? So in this video, I'm going to share with you the 3 most important steps that you're going to have to take in order to use these new conventional financing rules to house hack your way to financial freedom. So let's start with financing. After all, why would you want to use a conventional loan versus an FHA loan for your first house hack? Well, there are a few key differences between conventional and FHA loans that really over time make a huge difference when it comes to leveraging a property for rental income. On either conventional or FHA loans, since you're putting less than 20% down, you're going to have to end up paying mortgage insurance. Now, while the monthly amount of the mortgage insurance is more or less the same between conventional and FHA loans, there's one really big difference that gives conventional a huge advantage. When you're using an FHA loan and putting less than 10% down, the mortgage insurance is there for the life of the loan. That means the only way that you can get rid of mortgage insurance is by refinancing it into a conventional loan. However, if you're using a conventional loan, you can actually request to remove your mortgage insurance in as soon as 2 years, depending on the value of the home. So if you're going to use this property to generate rental income, especially over a longer period of time, the ability to save instantly pretty much $200 to $300 a month in mortgage insurance, that translates to a lot more cash flow in the long term. Now, speaking of rental income, the whole point of doing a house hack, for most people at least, isn't necessarily to create passive income. The main goal is just to try to get your payment as low as possible and get offset by some of these rental properties. Now, remember at the beginning when I said there's one major downside that makes FHA loans almost impossible to use when buying a multifamily home? For me, the biggest reason why you should consider using a conventional loan versus an FHA loan is the FHA has this thing called a self-sufficiency test. FHA requires that the property must cash flow positively or else the loan will not get approved. More specifically, FHA guidelines require that 75% of the gross rental income must completely cover the mortgage payment or exceed the mortgage payment in order for you to pass the self-sufficiency test. Now, of course, in a perfect world, every rental property that you would want to buy would cash flow positively. But in reality, especially with how high interest rates are right now, it's a lot harder for rents to exceed how high these mortgage payments are. And that might end up being a big deterrent because there can be times where you would qualify for an FHA loan and you could realistically afford, to buy this 3 or 4 unit property. But if it doesn't pass that self-sufficiency test, that basically leaves you with no other options. Okay, so I want you to imagine that you're buying a $700,000 triplex. With an FHA loan putting 3.5% down based on today's rates, that would give you a total housing payment of about $5,600 a month. And so based on FHA's self-sufficiency rules, that would mean you would have to have a combined rental income between all 3 units of $7,500 a month. So even if each of the units could rent for $2,400 a month and you were living in one of them, so that's about $4,800 a month coming in as rental income to help you offset your payment. So overall, you're looking at a really $800 a month mortgage payment to hold on to this property. You still wouldn't be able to qualify for this mortgage because it doesn't pass the FHA's self-sufficiency test. At least until now, with these new changes from Fannie Mae allowing you to finance a multifamily unit without having to pass any sort of self-sufficiency test at all. And whereas before, in order for you to go to a conventional loan, you would have to put 25% down on this home in order to go that route. Now, you just have to contribute 1.5% more, get up to that 5% down in order to go conventional, and now you don't have that self-sufficiency rule at all. So let's quickly recap how crazy of a deal this ends up being. Essentially, you're buying a $700,000 triplex. You're only putting $35,000 down. And since you've got 2 units that are paying you $2,400 each, effectively, you're putting $35,000 down in order to have a mortgage payment of $800 a month on a $700,000 home. So that's honestly insane when you think about it and actually say it out loud. And so ultimately, I think that's a huge win, because if your main goal is really to house hack your way to your first property, maybe you're not so concerned about cash flowing right out the gate, but rather you're just trying to offset these really high interest rates and a really high mortgage payment by house hacking your way and getting a little bit of rental income on the side. All right, now there's one other reason why this is an absolute game changer for all my house hackers out there. When you're using a conventional loan, you can do this over and over and over again, regardless if you're a first-time home buyer, and there's no real limit to how often you can do this. FHA has some rules that will pretty much restrict you from having 2 FHA loans at a time. So that would mean if you wanted to use your FHA loan again to buy another multifamily home, you would first have to refinance it into a conventional loan or some other kind of mortgage in order to use that FHA loan for the next house hack. But conventional loans don't have this kind of limitation at all. In fact, you can actually have up to 10 finance properties when you're using conventional loans. So just imagine this. Before this rule, you had 25% saved up to buy your first 4-unit home using a conventional loan. But that would only allow you to buy just one property. But now with these new changes, you could take that 25% down and split that into equal 5% down payments over the next 5 years and just keep that rolling and acquiring as many multifamily homes as you would want. And so this is going to create some pretty amazing opportunities for those who want to take advantage of this and are patient enough in order to qualify to buy their first rental property. Now, if you try to participate in the housing market over the last 2 years in any sort of way, you know how hard it is right now. I mean, mortgage rates have absolutely skyrocketed. We're approaching 8% at the time of me filming this video, and prices of homes haven't come down the way that we thought that they would. And that's made it pretty much unaffordable for majority of the home buyers that are actually out there, even if they're qualified, because at the end of the day, their take-home income isn't enough to support these huge mortgage payments. And so I guess it's not that surprising that Fannie Mae would make this change at the end of the year in order to make house buying a little bit more affordable, especially for those who are looking to create some, sort of multi-family real estate portfolio, as long as they're living in one of those units themselves. Now, as I mentioned, these changes take effect on November 18 of 2023, but that doesn't mean that you have to wait until November 18 in order to start applying for a mortgage. And so if it's been on your mind to house hack your way to your first property, I've left a link in the description below so you can book a one-on-one call with my team. We'll help start you getting that game plan ready. So come November 18, you're going to be ready to buy your first 1, 2, 3, or even 4-unit property. Now, while this is great news for first-time homebuyers and house hackers alike, if you're considering getting a mortgage at all, the first step in that process is getting pre-approved for a mortgage. In fact, none of this matters at all if you can't get a pre-approved for a mortgage. So lucky for you, I've created a video that goes over my best tips and tricks that I've compiled over the nearly a decade that I've had serving first-time homebuyers. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, consider subscribing if you want to see more content just like that, and I'll see you in this video next. See ya.